So we are about halfway through our first semester of experimenting with Coursera. We have four faculty members, Diana Kleiner, Paul Bloom, Bob Schiller, and Akil Amar, who were really our leaders in this, to be able to say that they wanted to be the first four to teach their courses on this platform. We're so grateful to the four of them for doing this. We're about halfway through. So as we say up here, it's way too early to make definitive judgments about Coursera, but that doesn't mean it's too early to start, developing some impressions and sharing some impressions. I think I'm a little bit inspired by all the conversation about the changes in the late night television hosts. So I've structured this as a top 10 list. So we'll go through it. But I'm going to change the format a little bit, and I don't think my media colleagues will like this. But if you have questions during the presentation, let's just stop and we can ask. We don't have to wait until the end, because this sort of jumps from topic to topic. I should also say that as we go through these, a lot of these items that we'll talk about are not new ideas, and they may actually be ideas that we've already discussed beforehand due to information that we received from some colleagues or from some peers, I should say, who were experimenting on one of the MOOC platforms. But now we have firsthand knowledge of it, so we can talk a little bit more intimately about each of these points. So this first one is certainly one of the obvious ones. That to mount a course on any of the MOOC platforms is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work for a lot of people. First and foremost, the lead faculty member, obviously. But then we think about the team that supports that lead faculty member. There are teaching assistants, which we'll talk about in a moment, the broadcast and media team, Ryan, Sarah, and Kirsten, who are in the back, is sort of the course operations team. It takes legal help. It takes coordinating with the Office of Public Affairs and Communications, as well as AYA, to get the messaging out there. So it really is a team of people needed to mount one of these courses, and it's a lot of work, especially the first time around. So what we're hoping is that if any of the faculty members are willing to offer the course a second or a third time, that we will see a little bit less work the second or third time, because we'll have videos created, we'll have the course structures in place. But the first time, we have to be clear, it is a lot of work for everyone involved. Secondly, this is what we're talking about with teaching assistants. I didn't use the term just because we're not exactly sure about titles, so we'll just focus on what it is. The graduate students who are helping us in these courses. The lead faculty member needs very strong teaching and academic support. On the other ends, things like technical or administration, we are helping the faculty member from that respect. But each faculty member has a teaching fellow to help them think about course structure, to help them manage the message boards, and help them engage in the course. I think what's interesting about this is, as Sarah said, the best way to give experience or to gain experience is to give experience. And perhaps these MOOCs offer us new ways to provide graduate students just small slivers of experience in online teaching. Now, one of our faculty members made a great point last week when we were talking about this idea of teaching support, and he said, what I find is someone who would make a great teaching assistant in the classroom is likely to make a great teaching assistant online. But if you think about that a little bit more, I think there's one other aspect to this, and that there are other opportunities for that teaching assistant to think about technology. So how do you really manage a discussion forum? How do you pose a question to get a conversation unfolding over a message thread? And these are the types of things that we can experiment with on Coursera with the four courses that we have. We'll go back to legal for a second. Again, this ties into the first idea of the really group of people that it takes to support these courses. When it comes to using copyrighted materials in your classroom, and what we're really thinking about here are readings, if you want to provide your class, whether they're articles or parts of books, it takes time, money, or luck, and usually all three. And this is something we need to plan certainly for the next time around as we talk with the faculty members. If they do have readings that they'd like to supply their students, what is the model there to work with the publishing company, work with the rights holders, to be able to share that content in the context of a MOOC classroom? Because as you can imagine from a publisher, this is a very different request to say, we have a course with 150,000 students enrolled and we'd like to use your book. Is that okay? And they're not entirely sure what the relationship is there. So we need to think about that and certainly work through it hand in hand with the publishers and the rights holders. When we talk about the students now, we shift over to the student. The students want an active experience on Coursera. This is certainly one of the big shifts between the MOOCs of 2014 and the first generation of open courses, whether that was MIT's OpenCourseWare or OpenYale courses. Those were all very passive experiences. It was a matter of going to a website, downloading material or watching material, and sort of learning on your own. The MOOC platforms of today are interactive. There's assessment involved. There's discussion that's needed. And that's what these students are looking for. But the fortunate side of this is that there are many ways to meet this expectation. And I think this ties in very nicely with the opportunities for graduate students. So when we look at our 4 courses that are currently on Coursera, they're very different. They're very different in subject matter. They're very different in the way the faculty members are engaging in the course. So I'll use Akil's course, for example. One of the things we did was work with his faculty members to invite them down to the broadcast studio on a Friday afternoon, and for 1 hour, they were in virtually a message board, and they responded to questions in real time. So students watched the lectures and posed questions. They were firing off answers as quickly as they could. At the end of an hour, we had 3 teaching fellows with very tired hands and about 2,000 students who were very appreciative of the time that these teaching fellows took to answer their questions. But they gained some great experience in this, so it really is a win-win situation. Paul Bloom does a weekly video show where he and his teaching assistant pull some of the more comments, the comments that catch his eye throughout the week in the message board, and they run through them and they provide their perspective on video. And the 2 of them co-host that. So there his teaching fellow is getting a really interesting opportunity to talk with Paul about these concepts and give her thoughts and opinions on the matter. So there are very different ways to do this, a lot of opportunity. The other thing about Coursera students is they're opinionated, and they are really loyal and excited about this opportunity, which is a phenomenal thing. So as a faculty member, as an instructor, you need to be prepared for a lot of different opinions. And some of them are perhaps not so complimentary because students have different expectations. But again, I don't think this is very different from a regular classroom. As we talk about this experience with our 4 faculty members, they say, well, really in anything, you should take the top 5% and the bottom 5%, throw those out and focus on the middle. And you need to remember that in a MOOC. Sometimes it could get a little bit overwhelming because we're now talking about tens of thousands of students who are watching your lectures and commenting on the message boards. But we really need to keep that in mind. It's not respond to every individual criticism or thought because students just have different expectations. This was something that we heard about, but now is one of these ideas that we can validate, this idea that Coursera students help each other in a significant way. The number that we were told by the Coursera leadership team early on was that the average response time was 22 minutes. So after a question by a student was posed, they felt that they received really an answer that solved their issue within 22 minutes by another student. And we've seen this firsthand. The conversations that unfold student to student, the help that they want to provide one another is fascinating. And it's helpful for us because, as you can imagine, with 4 courses and tens of thousands of students and students who are all around the world learning 24 hours a day, we couldn't possibly keep up with all of the questions. So to have the students there helping each other is not only heartening, but it's really helpful as well. Which leads us into another point about the student message boards. Like any message board on the internet, there's not a message board on the internet that does not include what we would call trolls or some type of nonsense, people just looking to agitate the conversation. But the Coursera message threads also include plenty of unbelievable, intelligent, and exciting conversation. And I'm just going to give one quick example here from Bob Schiller's course. So Bob's teaching financial markets on Coursera. His lectures are they're not easy. I mean, these are Yale courses. He is a Nobel Prize winner. There's a lot of material that you need to know to really understand what he's talking about. So here's one student in Bob's course who has taken it upon themselves to go and watch each lecture and then provide their own notes to the lecture and background material to help the other students understand some of the points that Bob is making in the lecture. There are charts and graphs. Sarah, from my team, who is managing this course with Bob, showed him on Friday. And Bob was intrigued enough and looked at it and thought it was quality enough where we're going to contact the student and ask if you'd like to become a teaching fellow, what you call a community TA on Coursera, to help and perhaps provide lecture notes from this point forward. And this is just one example, a recent example that we became aware of on Thursday. In all of our other classes, you just see such amazing conversation unfold. And what's really phenomenal about it is the variety of students, demographics, age ranges, regions, and that really, as we've heard, this opportunity of using technology to connect cultures, to connect parts of the world. We see that here as well. This was, of course, one of the big criticisms about MOOCs and has been a point of discussion for a long time, this idea of retention rates. Here I say they're a concern, or maybe they aren't. And I'm not just hedging a bet here. I'll explain the point behind this. So the first is when we think about retention rates, this conversation started at really when the MOOCs took off. And it started in some ways with a flawed argument. And the idea was retention rates are 5% because 150,000 people signed up for all these courses and only, I'm not a mathematician, so let's just say 5,000 completed the course. Right? Well, one of the problems with that argument is that it was the denominator. It was based on this idea that the number of students who enrolled for free in the course were all intending to complete the course. So the first thing we have found out is that that is not true. What we see on average for our courses is about 50% of the students who enroll in a course ever actually go back to the course once it starts. So you could say, I enroll in a course 2 months ago, then when the course starts, I never go into the class, I never engage with one learning material in that course. So if you think about retention rates, I don't think you can base it on that idea of how many students enrolled and how many students finished. So we need to think about what we're talking about with retention rates. But more importantly, the question is that even what we're after for MOOCs? Are we after retention rates or are we after engagement? If a student joins a MOOC and only has the intention of watching 4 weeks of lectures, because those are the only 4 topics that they're interested in. They watch the 4 lectures and they leave. To me, that's not considered a failure, and I don't think we should consider that a failure. We have delivered a piece of education that this student was after, and to me, that's a successful metric. So once the courses are done, we need to really think about what we're trying to measure, and then how do we define the measurements around this. Most of our audience is international and educated. It will be no surprise that Akil's constitutional law course has the largest number of U.S. students. He's at 42% domestic students. Bob's is on the other side of the spectrum. He's at 18% domestic. And then Paul's and Diana's fall very close to the average of 27%. On average, less than 10% of the students enrolling in our courses on Coursera don't have a tertiary degree of some point. All the others have, whether it's a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, or some type of professional degree. There's so much exciting about our courses on Coursera. The one word that I would use to describe our experience so far is fascinating. The data that we can get, the information, how we've learned, how we teach students, and how we share information has just been incredible. And there are so many things, I think opportunities that we haven't even thought of yet. And here's one example that sort of came our way late in the game before we started the first round of courses. Diana Kleiner created an ebook that's a companion to her course on Coursera as well as Open Yale courses and iTunes. So she took some of her images that are in the course and some that she didn't publish in the course, and she created original 250-word captions for each image and allowed the students, worked with the Yale University Press, to dream up this new digital asset, this new digital learning material that we hadn't thought about when we first approached Diana in April to teach a course. And I think this is an example that there will be a lot of opportunities that we haven't even begun to imagine yet. Like any good list, we have a bonus. And that is that although these courses are distinctly Yale, which means if you are watching one of these courses, you will know that this is a Yale course. The faculty member, the subject, the way we cover it, the way the broadcast and media team has created the assets, we shouldn't confuse these with teaching a course in New Haven to Yale students. And we just have to adjust our expectations and adjust the way we think about them because they are 2 different things, but we can learn a lot from each that will help the other. So I expect that some of the learning that we do in the MOOCs will help us as we think about teaching students here in New Haven and vice versa. So those are our top 11. I'm sure we'll develop more. We may even edit these as we go along. These are early ones. Any questions? None? Okay. Oh, yes, Sarah. Great. Yeah.
No problem. Can you say something about who signed up for, and was on signature track versus open and how that played into retention rates?
Well, the retention rates for signature track enrollees is, I mean, multiples higher. I think the number is around 75% at this point. So and that's around, we expected around between 70 and 80%.
And how many people went signature versus not?
Signature track has, I would say, a few thousand. I can get the latest numbers for you and share them. Yes?
Do you think all this...
Oh, sorry.
As I know you're involved also in the small online courses that we're offering at GINAM, SOM, and I guess it's pretty similar to what they are doing with the summer courses. Do you think these Coursera courses are going to affect the way we teach in our other courses that are for credit, that professors might become more facilitators and students might get more protagonism compared to these courses? Or you said we should differentiate having a course here and Coursera. How is that different? Or how will that affect the way professors teach in class?
Right. So I can't speak for how faculty will adapt, what they learn in MOOCs or whether or not these will play a larger role. But I do think it provides us a great opportunity to experiment with online education in a way that's, different from a traditional Yale College classroom, and the fact that we have these tens of thousands of students and some really interesting technology tools at our disposal to think about how do we structure conversations online to students who are global, who again are from different demographic backgrounds. So I think it's a great experimentation for us, and then it will be interesting to see how individual faculty members apply that learning to their courses here in New Haven. Right, oh, absolutely. So this was Jim Rolfe from the last session that we did, where Jim had this idea where when you look at the MOOC model of watching lectures before class or watching lectures and then being assessed frequently on what you're learning on those lectures, Jim wanted to take that model but put it in his classroom. Jim Rolfe is a lecturer in calculus in Yale College. So when he and I met last summer, we were talking about what it is he wanted to do. He needed to create videos, and he needed a system for delivering those videos. So I said to him, if we separate these two ideas, creating videos we can certainly do, and Guy Ordoliva, who's back on camera here, worked with Jim and his teaching fellow Matt Krosman to produce those videos. That's easy. I said for the delivery, we actually do have a tool on campus available to us that can do it, but we've never used it before, and this was last fall, and that's Coursera. So we can deliver it, and we can do the assessment in video, and then you can work with the Coursera team to look at the data, to understand what your students had more difficulty grasping, and then tailor your instruction in the classroom to those topics. That's exactly what he did. And as he said last time in the last session, the students who were in the section where he delivered the videos through Coursera and then tailored the instruction, I think it was, their performance on the midterm and final was 5% higher on average than the other student. So that's an example where you look at what this is teaching us about. Teaching in some sense. This idea of short video, frequent assessment. I don't know that these concepts are new, but we now have tools to make them easier to translate into a Yale College classroom or a Yale graduate and professional classroom. That's it.
Anything else? Well, I think you can all sense that this is an enormous project. The numbers involved, all of the assessment that's involved, the organization of it, the filming of it with Guy in the back, and a whole cadre of people, Ryan and Sarah, who are with us today as well. And it's a huge credit to Lucas to have pulled all of this off and delivered it in a timely fashion. And it's really quite magnificent. Now, we're about to stop here and go home. So I ask you, are you going to go home and watch the 16th episode of House of Cards? Or are you going to tune into Robert Schiller week 2? It's a real tough decision, and I'll leave that up to you. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.